Today I'm going to talk to you about moving to Miami and the next steps, and I'm going to get started right now. Hey everyone, my name is Jamey Prezzi. I'm a real estate agent in Miami and Miami Beach, and last week I did a video about the first steps that you need to think about when moving to Miami. Today I'm going to talk about the next steps that you need to think about when moving to Miami and just wrap up this quick introduction to buying real estate in our city. Obviously this does not cover the whole entire buying process, but just a few ideas to give you an idea about how to get started in terms of thinking about making a move to Miami and buying real estate here. First, before I get started, if this is your first time here, hit the subscribe button so you never miss another update. I do put out videos every week, and also use the link in my information box and download our free guide today. I have updated that guide page, so hopefully you'll find some new and interesting information as soon as you download that page to get the guides. Okay, let's get started. So in the first video, I talked a lot about if you need financing or you're interested in seeking financing, it's really important to speak to a lender who can best guide you and also create a scenario around a product based on the taxes and insurance and obviously the down payment and the closing costs. Also, if you're paying cash, just having sort of everything organized so you have a budget prepared for that cash purchase as well. It is very common today before accessing properties that sellers agents request a pre-approval letter or proof of cash funds in order to access the property, just mainly because of COVID, and they want to limit the amount of people through the property. So it's not everybody, but a lot of people do ask for it. So just make sure that you have that ready to go so that we can access a property, especially if it's a hot property. We don't want to miss out on that because we didn't prepare for that in advance. So I'll also need some of this information, especially if you're getting financing, in order to prepare an offer, which leads me to the next thing that's very important to expect here. So I know in some states when you want to make an offer on a property, very often that will be a verbal offer back and forth, and then when you kind of come to terms verbally, an attorney creates the actual contract. Here we do it a lot differently. Here the actual offer is written out on an approved Florida contract, and then once that contract is executed and delivered to all parties, then that becomes the contract by which the transaction is governed. So sometimes people get a little bit like, oh, why can't we just do a verbal offer? And the reason why is because it will not be taken seriously, because that's not the standard that is set here. People very often will glance over verbal offers, and you want to make sure that you really take the time to prepare an offer properly and back it up showing proof of funds in terms of how you're planning to pay for that property. We are in a competitive market here, so you don't want to miss, again, an opportunity just because you had a different expectation or you weren't prepared in terms of showing how you're planning to pay for that property. Next, I really recommend to get laser focused and really hone in and kind of focused on the type of property that you want to purchase here. If you want to buy a single family home, okay, let's focus on single family homes. If you want to buy a townhouse, let's do that. If you want to buy a condominium, let's focus on that. We just have a lot of different property types, and if you're really spending a lot of time looking at all three or just two, it can really be confusing in terms of what you get for your money, and of course also the neighborhood and where you want to live. I highly recommend, if you're not super familiar with our area, to familiarize yourself with the area and get very focused and really try to go ahead in advance and determine the type of property that you want to buy, whether it's a single family home or a condominium. And ownership in those two different property types is very different here. So it's something we can have a discussion about, but I really do recommend when people come to me and say, I don't know if we want to buy a house or a condominium, let's talk through that process, and we can usually kind of get focused in just based on a discussion. Also, a lot of people want to know, how much does it cost me to buy a property there in terms of the extra cost? So Obviously, you're going to want to have some money set aside for inspections, and inspections really vary pretty much based on the square footage of that property and also how deep you want to go into inspections. Some people very often just do a general inspection, especially if it's just a condominium and maybe a mold report. Some people go super detailed on the single family homes where they scope the pipes and do all kinds of different inspections. Maybe there's a septic tank and you need to do a septic tank inspection. So just to answer the question in terms of out-of-pocket expenses for inspections, those can cost anywhere from a couple $100s to several thousands of dollars depending on what you want to do, obviously how big is the property and how many systems and components are on that property. If you're paying cash, you can expect to pay 1 to 2% of the purchase price in closing costs. If you're getting financing, around 3 to 5% of the purchase price in closing costs. And you also want to make sure that obviously if you're getting financing that you have your down payment amount set aside and also the earnest money deposit that you put against the contract. Ultimately, that earnest money deposit gets credited towards the balance at closing, so it's not like extra, but you do need to have that money very accessible when you initially go under contract on the property. I think that's it for my tips about moving here and just giving you some things to think about. Again, we always like to cover all of this in a lot of detail at a buyer consultation. We're more than happy to help you, and we're always here to be a resource for you. I will see you soon.